Hello Star Wars fans, and welcome to episode 70 of Journey into Legends. Today we're going to be reading the 1998 Star Wars run by Dark Horse. Dark Horse's main Star Wars run ran from 1998 to 2002 before being rebranded as Star Wars Republic. I'm extremely excited to get into this series. I've heard so many great things about it, and I'm really excited to finally read some prequel-era content. So without further ado, let's read and review. Alright, so the first arc of this run is called Prelude to Rebellion, and follows Ki-Adi-Mundi as he returns to his home planet of Syria on a diplomatic mission. And I really loved this first arc. I really loved the character of Ki-Adi-Mundi in this story, the exploration of Syrian marriage, and his feelings towards Syria joining the Republic made him a really fascinating character. It was also really neat to see Effent Mon from the Tales books show up this early on in the timeline. Already this series is doing a great job of sewing continuity between the eras. My only complaint with this arc was that the villains were a bit underwhelming. Although it was cool to see Effent Mon, he didn't really do much, and the other secondary villains were fairly forgettable. But overall, this was a really great way to start the series. Included at the end of issues 4 through 6 was a short 3-part comic about a young Ki-Adi-Mundi returning home as a Jedi to deal with the pirates that harassed his village when he was a kid. Overall, despite being a really short arc about the size of a single issue altogether, I again really enjoyed this story. I really like all the development Ki-Adi-Mundi is getting, turning him from just a background film character to a fully fleshed out and great character. Alright, so I just finished issues 7 through 12, an arc called Outlander, and although probably my least favorite arc thus far, this was another really fun story. First off, I really loved the characters of Sharad Het and his son, Asharad Het. Jedi Tuskens is such a fun concept, and I love the way that it was handled. We also met Aurra Singh in this arc, and I'm interested to see more of her later on. Overall, like I said, I did prefer the previous arc, simply due to its treatment of Ki-Adi-Mundi, who didn't have the most opportunity to shine in this arc. Alright, so our next arc is called Emissaries to Malastare, and this one was a lot of fun. Malastare was a really fun setting, and it was great to see some pod racing again. But definitely my favorite part of this arc was getting to see all the different Jedi go on a mission together. My only issue with this arc was that, for some reason, it randomly switched gears and for the last 2 issues, told an entirely different story about Mace Windu and Depa Billaba investigating a gladiator arena on Nar Shaddaa. Now don't get me wrong, this was a really fun story as well, but I thought it was a really strange decision to not make it a separate arc entirely. Alright, so next I read a short little standalone 4-issue comic called Acts of War, which was pretty fun. Once again, it was great to see such a large group of Jedi on a mission together, which made for a really enjoyable dynamic. I also really liked how high stakes this story felt. All the action and violence made this very gritty, and the death of a few Jedi gave it some real stakes. Alright, so the next arc we have is called Twilight, and this one is our formal introduction to the character of Quinlan Vos, and I really enjoyed this story. Vos is such an interesting character, and I'm already enjoying the moral ambiguity of him riding that line between the light side and dark side. I also really enjoyed his dynamic with Vili, who was such a fun character. And finally, I really enjoyed Vos's journey that took him from Nar Shaddaa to Ryloth to discover who he was before his memory was erased. Anyways, I'm really excited to see more from Quinlan Vos in the issues to come. Alright, so next we have another Quinlan Vos-centric arc. This one's called Infinity's End, and this one was another really fun one, mainly because of the fantastic lore. Not only was it great to see Dathomir again, especially in this era, but I thought the entire Infinity Gate storyline was so cool. I love when the film eras of Star Wars explore Old Republic concepts like this, and the Infinity Gate is just such a fascinating concept to me. Alright, so next is issue 27 titled Starcrash, and this issue was a really weird one. I didn't mind that it was a standalone story about a random Jedi on an irrelevant mission, but what irked me was the writing. Compared to the fantastic and gritty writing of the rest of the series, this was super kiddie and poorly written. It felt like it was written by a 10-year-old for 10-year-olds, and amidst all these great, dark, Quinlan Vosk-centric storylines, some random Saturday morning cartoon-esque issue about the least interesting Jedi in all of Star Wars was very strange indeed. Anyways, with that issue out of the way, let's move on to better things. Alright, so the next arc we have is called The Hunt for Aurra Sing, and unfortunately this one was pretty underwhelming for me. It started really violent and gritty, which I really enjoyed, but for the most part it was a pretty underwhelming story, and especially with the way it ended, there was no huge change to the status quo. Aurra Sing got away, and no major Jedi characters died. Honestly, the biggest change was that Asharad Het is now the Dark Woman's Padawan, rather than Ki-Adi-Mundi's, which is disappointing, since I really liked their dynamic. Anyways, let's move on to the next story. Alright, so next I read the short little 3-part comic from Dark Horse Extra issues 35 to 37, titled Heart of Fire. And this was a very short and sweet story. I thought it was great to see the Twi'lek Padawan from the previous arc share a little short moment with Quinlan Vos and bond with him over Aayla Secura. Of course, with it being only 3 pages long, there isn't much to unpack here, but for what it was, I rather enjoyed it. Alright, so our next few stories are a few about Aurra Sing, since we just got an entire arc about her. The first comes from Dark Horse Annual 2000 and is called Aurra's Song, and this one kinda sucked. Basically, it's a meaningless story about Aurra and some random Anzadi from her past, and it wasn't very good at all. Anyways, I also read The Bounty Hunter's Aurra Sing, which was actually a pretty good issue. Basically, Aurra gets hired by this fib priest to hunt down a Jedi-turned-pirate and his 2 Shido impersonators. As she hunts and kills all 3, it turns out that all 3 were impersonators and that Rhys Cairn, the pirate, was the one who hired Aurra in the first place. And yeah, overall this was a fun story. I thought the twist ending was actually quite well handled, and I really enjoyed seeing original trilogy planets such as Endor and Hoth during the pre-Phantom Menace era. Anyways, let's get back to the main Star Wars run. Alright, so the next arc brings Quinlan Vos back to his home system, to the planet of Kifex, in search of his Padawan, Aayla Secura. We get more of his dynamic with Vili, as well as a new Anzadi Darksider named Volf Karko. Overall, I wasn't a huge fan of this arc. Kifex was an uninteresting setting, Karko was a very boring villain, and overall, the story just wasn't super enjoyable. It was cool seeing Vili again, and it did have some cool moments like when Vos kills Karko, and Aayla regains her memories, but for the most part, this was a pretty underwhelming story. Alright, so our next arc is called the Stark Hyperspace War, and actually primarily took place about a decade before the Phantom Menace, and I really enjoyed this one. It was great to see Plo Koon finally get his due. He was absolutely awesome in this arc. And I really enjoyed the plot of this arc. There were some similarities to the X-Wing series with the Bacta shortage, and I thought Ayako Stark was an interesting character. Alright, so our next arc is called the Devaronian version, and is basically a retelling of Jedi Council Acts of War, but from Vili's perspective. And this story was absolutely hilarious. John Ostrander uses the idea of an unreliable narrator and just runs loose with it, and it was so great. There's so many great gags in here, such as the Jedi begging Vili to bring them the treasure they lost, or Yoda being portrayed as this feral, almost Gollum-esque character. This storyline was just so funny, definitely one of the funniest stories from the EU so far, and I absolutely loved it. Oh, right, so the last arc I have to talk about is called Rite of Passage, and this one was really good. This arc focused once again on Quinlan Voss, Ayla Secura, and Thulm, all of whom are really great characters. We're also introduced to the Morgulkai, who were really cool, and I'm interested to see more of them. This arc also saw the first appearance of Count Dooku in my EU journey, so that was really awesome and made me even more excited to get into the Republic comics. Last but not least, this arc also saw the inclusion of a character named Nat Secura, whose name was extremely familiar to me, so I did a bit of scrolling through the wiki, and it turns out that this is the guy from the Bib Fortuna story in Tales from Jabba's Palace, who gets his brain cut out into a Biomar monk, so that is some fantastic continuity right there. Anyways, this was a really cool arc with some great character development, especially for Ayla Secura, and some really good setup for Republic. Anyways, that marks the end of the main Star Wars comics from Dark Horse. Overall, I absolutely loved these comics. Such a great way to start our journey into the prequel era stories. It was great to see so many familiar faces from the films, and I loved how background characters like Ki-Adi-Mundi, Plo Koon, Ayla Secura, and Aurra Sing got so much development. And of course, all of the new characters, Quinlan Voss, Thulm, Villy, Asharad Het, and many more, were just really great characters. Anyways, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and stay tuned for my next video where I will be reading and reviewing the second half of this run, which was renamed Star Wars Republic. See ya.